Then there's another case in Acts 28. I can't go into the whole thing, but Paul and some other people had landed on an island, and the Bible says it was cold, it was wet, and the Bible says that Paul was getting some wood for the fire, and the Bible says that a viper, a snake, came out of the wood and attached itself to Paul's hand. And the people standing around looked, and they thought for surely Paul would fall dead. They thought that Paul was suffering the vengeance of having committed a crime. And the Bible says Paul shook the serpent off. He shook it off. He had the hand of dominion. He had dominion in his life because of the power of Jesus Christ that was working in his life. And we ought to be the same way. We ought to have dominion in our lives to the point that we can shake the serpent off. Shake him off. We've got to have dominion in our lives to the point where we can shake the serpent off, where we can, even while everybody's standing around looking for us to die, waiting on Timothy to die, waiting on Timothy to die, waiting on Timothy to swell up and die before they get over to that new church. We ought to be able to shake the serpent off. And then the Bible says after Paul shook the serpent off, the Bible says those same people began to magnify and glorify Paul. Glorify the name of, yes, they thought he was a god come down from Jupiter, one of the Greek gods. We ought to have that kind of dominion. Now I go to the text. Every one of us is biologically related to Noah and his sons. This is Genesis 9:18 through 28. Every one of us is biologically related to Noah and his sons. The Bible says Noah, he was a man of the soil, and the Bible says he planted a vineyard and drank some of its wine. He became drunk. See, he was anxious to resume. He was anxious to get back to doing what he was doing before he built the ark. You understand that, don't you? You were doing something, and then you had to do something else for a long time. You're kind of anxious to get back. Like some of you might be from Savannah, then you come here and work in Athens for 30 years. Then after you retire from UGA or whatever, you're kind of anxious to get back to Savannah and get back to doing what you were doing. Something like that. The Bible says he was anxious, or he could have been anxious to get back to his previous vocation. The Bible says he was a man of the soil. He planted a vineyard, he drank some of its wine, and he became drunk. I have a warning for you. Sometimes your gift, your vocation that is meant to be a blessing can become a hindrance. If you're not careful, your gift or your blessing can become, your vocation can become it can become a curse if you don't know how to handle it, if you don't handle it correctly. Honorable people can be led to dishonor God through a moment of indiscretion, through a moment of carelessness. The Bible says in verse 22, chapter 9, Ham, the father of Canaan, he saw his father's nakedness. Unfortunately, most of us have also seen our father's nakedness.